Today we're going to look at replacing a speaker arm on a Quest 2. So the customer sent this headset in so that we could replace the speaker arm on it so they could use it again. And although I didn't get a whole lot of details on what the damage was from, it seems like maybe a dog got a hold of it and chewed it up. It appears to be some bite marks here, and well, it's in pretty bad shape, so we're just going to replace this whole component here. Now, contrary to popular opinion, the speaker arm and the speaker are pretty much fused together, and in my personal opinion, it's not really worth it to separate the existing speaker from the speaker arm. So what I usually do is just install a whole new speaker arm assembly in every headset. They clip in from the inside, so what we'll have to do is a full teardown on this unit so that we can access those points on the inside that the speaker arm screws into. Just like any Quest 2 repair, we're going to start with our T2 screwdriver and we're going to take out the face shield. Now that we've got the face shield unscrewed, we can pop the clips on both sides using our pry tool. And we're going to lift up from the nose. By lifting up from the nose, we ensure that we do not damage this ribbon cable latch, which we'll now pop. And we can pull the proximity sensor and face shield straight back away from the latch. And we'll set that off to the side. We don't need it right now. Now we take our normal Phillips screwdriver and we can take out the 5 screws that hold in the face plate on the front. Now that I've removed all 5 screws, I can go ahead and take the faceplate off. We're just going to grab the seam here on the front, and you just pop with your fingernails on one corner and pop on the other corner, and then it should just come straight out. Just like that. Now you can kind of see the connection point where the speaker arm holds into the shell frame here. So there's actually a retaining ring here that's screwed in, and it's screwed in with the charge port down there. But there's also these pins that hold it in. And in order to take the speaker arm all the way out, all of this has to come out. The best way to access all of this is to take the LCD out, and you can only take the LCD out if everything comes out. So we'll do that next. I know taking everything out seems like a bit of a process, but I really don't recommend skipping steps here. I've seen a lot of people try to skip steps and try to work around things, and they always end up stripping screws and damaging the headset even worse. So this is kind of the long way around, but it's the only path that I've found that really works reliably. If your headset doesn't stay balanced and it tips up like this, you can always slide your faceplate underneath, and that'll help balance your headset while you're working on it. For some odd reason, some headsets stay balanced better than others. I only find that I need it about 50% of the time. Next, we'll take this retainer that holds in these cables on the motherboard. First, we need to lift up on this Wi-Fi antenna. And once that's unattached, we can just unscrew these 3 screws. Now that retainer's removed, we can take off the battery cable and the charge port cable so the motherboard no longer gets power. One of the screws that held in that retainer also holds in the fan, and then you've got 2 more screws here. We'll go ahead and take those out. Once the screws are out, the fan just kind of pops out. It is held in a little bit by the shelf frame, so we can just kind of lift up on the top there and then pull the fan straight out. Next, I'll go ahead and take off this heatsink with these 4 screws here. And then the heatsink just pops off. Then we'll go around and undo all of our latches. So we obviously have our speakers, we've got our cameras, we've already undone our battery and our charge port, and then we've got our IPD and our LED and our power button. We'll go ahead and take those out now. It's really important when you're undoing these to flip the latches all the way up and make sure that the cables come straight back. Sometimes they get stuck a little bit because there's adhesive that holds them down, but you want to make sure you pull straight back so that you don't damage the sides of the latches here. This part of the ribbon latch is pretty delicate, and if you move and wiggle the ribbon from side to side as you're taking it out, it will damage it. This big ribbon right here goes to your LCD, and I'm going to pop that up with my pry tool on the side and lift straight up and away. These 2 at the top for the LED and the IPD, you're going to have to undo these, and then you're going to have to pull the tape off. It can be a bit of a tricky process because the tape is designed to hold the cables in. So if you're not careful pulling the cables straight back out of their latches, you can damage those latches in the process. Sometimes I like to hold the cable while I pull the tape away, so that way I don't accidentally rip the cable. Now that all the ribbons and the screws are undone, the motherboard should just lift straight up and away. I kind of glossed over this because I got a little carried away, but there are 4 screws here that hold this in, as well as that 1 hex bolt right there that holds it in. So you've really got 5 screws that kind of hold it in, but outside of that and the ribbons, the motherboard just comes straight out. Now we've got this Wi-Fi antenna. It's kind of hooked in. We'll just pull that back. There's a little bit of tape here. We'll peel that away so we can unlatch that. And then there's 4 more screws that hold the LCD in. So we'll go ahead and take those out with our Phillips screwdriver. The battery cable does have some adhesive on the back of it. I'll just take my pry tool and work my way behind it to lift that up. And now the LCD should just come out. Just like that. Now that the LCD is out, I can actually access these screws here. So we'll go ahead and start taking those out. Your speaker cable wire is kind of wrapped up here in these 2 tongs, but you know, it's broken anyway, so. I've taken out these bottom 3 screws, and now I need to get access to this top screw here, so we're going to have to take out the battery. We're going to start by removing the head strap retainer, which kind of holds the battery down. And then there's 4 screws that hold the battery in. This one's number 2, number 3, and number 4. Cool. The battery just comes out like that. And now I can get access to this final screw here. And now this ring should just pop right out. There's 2 rubber bands that hold this retainer in place. We're going to go ahead and take those off, just some tweezers. The rubber bands are actually kind of what slows the movement of the speaker arm, so that resistance that you feel moving the speaker arm is because those rubber bands are there. So they do play a crucial role. This next part may be the most challenging part of this entire repair, which is getting these pins out. I use a bent pry tool like this so that I can get underneath the pins and pull them out. It's a very gentle process, and if you don't pull out straight back, you will damage these pins, and it makes them very, very difficult to remove. There's one. Now I just got to do that 4 more times. Warping these pins and making them pretty much irreparable is easier to do than you think it is. I've done it many times, but luckily I have lots of pins. There's number 3. And as it usually goes, I got 1 pin that's just giving me a little bit of trouble. So I may have to get in here with some pliers and take it out. The problem with the pliers is that you pretty much damage the pin beyond repair if you have to use the pliers. There's no way to put it back in place if you do that. There we go. Beautiful. Now that all the pins are out, this retaining ring just spins a little bit counterclockwise. And it just comes loose. Cool. Now we can replace the speaker arm finally. We'll take our new speaker arm and we'll just run that through. Put our retainer back around the speaker arm. Twist it back. And that's locked in place. Now we'll go ahead and put our pins back in place. The pins go in a lot easier than they come out. We're just going to grab one with tweezers by the tab at the top. And you do want the tabs kind of facing inside. You don't want them facing toward the black ring. Cool. Got my pins in place. We'll put our gaskets back on. These little rubber bands here, because we definitely want the speaker arm to have that resistance factor when the user turns it. Now we'll put this bracket back on. There we go. And now we can screw that back in. Alright, now that speaker arm's acting exactly like we want it to. It only moves so far, and it's got a nice resistance to it. So we'll go ahead and put the battery back in. When I put the battery back in, remember that the proximity sensor plugs in on this side and it extends out to the battery on that side, so we'll face it this way. Cool. And finally we got our head strap retainer here. Maybe I'm just being picky, but this proximity sensor extension cable looks crooked to me for some reason. That's better. Alright, now we can start putting things back in the shell, starting with the LCD assembly. When we're putting this back in here, we just need to make sure all of our cables end up on the right side, and I like to make sure that the lenses are collapsed down to the 1 and not on the 3, because it just makes it a little easier to slide things in here. Looks like I got my speaker cables. I've got both ribbons here. Got my battery. Got my Wi-Fi antenna. Got my Wi-Fi antenna 2, power button, and my cameras. So we're going to seat this antenna along these grooves. These little clips kind of hold it in. And then we can put our board back in place. Always like to make sure that these thermal pads are still here. And I've still got some thermal putty on here, so we should be good. People ask me a lot if the devices ever need to be re-thermal pasted. I've never seen that or had that experience. For the most part, the thermal paste putty that is on here seems to last regardless of how many times I have to tear a unit down. Overheating seems to be mostly caused by the fans having issues. So either your fan is failing or it's just too dirty, or sometimes it's broken. And I'm sure you're asking yourself, but Dan, nothing is screwed back in. You haven't screwed in the motherboard. You haven't even screwed the LCD assembly back in place. That's because I like to test the units before I start screwing things like that back in place, because God forbid I've missed something or the LCD is bad for some reason and I need to go back and do it. It just saves me a lot of time in the repair process to go ahead and plug the board in and test it. Alright, got that battery cable seated, and now we are gonna plug it in. Make sure that light comes on. That's a good sign. I'm gonna let that charge up for a second, and then we'll give it a test. Alright, so I turned it on and just made sure that everything charged up and powered up and tracked okay, so I think we're all good to go. No issues with the proximity sensor, no issues with the cameras, so we're just gonna roll right on through. So let's go ahead and screw the LCD back in. We've got 4 screws. The rounded top screws go at the bottom near the cameras. So like a screw like this, it's got a little bit more roundedness to it. They go up the top or at the bottom. And then the flat top screws, those go on the sides, right here. And right here. Next, we're going to screw the motherboard down. You have these little non-ferrous screws for the motherboard, so you kind of need to hold them down with tweezers to get them in place, and then once they're in place, you can just screw them in. Go ahead and put our heatsink on. Line that up with the 4 holes. And we've got 4 of the small black screws that need to go in here. Next, we can put our fan in. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. Just like that. And then we'll go ahead and slip this into the shell there. And then you've got your 1 T2 screw that just goes above the LED. And that's just got a little sticky on the back of it, so it should just sit down there. If it doesn't, because the adhesive is worn off, it's not a big deal. I wouldn't worry about it. Go ahead and put my camera O-rings on. Then we need to take our little hex screw and put it right here, because it functions as a standoff for that retainer bar that holds in the battery cable. If you have like a little hex bit like this, that kind of helps you tighten it down. And then we'll go ahead and put this back on. Got 2 short screws and 1 long screw. The 2 short screws go in the middle and the bottom, and this one last screw will go up top. Now we can go ahead and plug that Wi-Fi antenna back in. Now we'll go ahead and put our Bluetooth back in. We're just going to hook that on the motherboard. Just a little bit of pressure there, and then it hooks in these clips. I like to start with the long screws first. I don't have a reason for that. It's just kind of out of habit, but they'll go at the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and put in our other screws. There are 4 flat top screws and 2 round top screws. The round top screws go closer to the middle, and the flat top screws go on the outsides here. The round top screws usually have a little bit of blue paint on them, so you can differentiate those. And then those will go right here where they hold the fan in. Personally, I think the screws on this Bluetooth bar are a little bit overkill, because this is all held in place by the faceplate anyway. But we don't like to skip steps. Skipping steps leads to unintended consequences. Alrighty. And then we'll put our faceplate on. Make sure that's clipped up nice. I don't see any gaps in the seams there. I'll go ahead and throw in my dummy proximity sensor so I can test this one more time before I start screwing everything back in. I keep a little dummy proximity sensor like this because it helps me assess whether or not the tracking is working and the proximity sensor is working. Everything's plugged in before I actually put the faceplate back on, because putting this on is like 10 more steps than just plugging one of these in. I can see an image in there, and if I take my finger off, I can see the light kind of go away. So that's a pretty good indication that proximity sensor is working and that I didn't mess anything up with the extension ribbon cable when I moved it. So we'll go ahead and turn the unit back off, and we can start plugging everything else back in. The faceplate, again, this one on the outside, is held in by 5 screws, and the flat tops all go at the bottom. So you've got 3 points here at the bottom where the flat top screws go, and then you've got 2 round top screws that are a little bit longer that go up near the battery compartment. And my screwdriver is just a little chunky, so I need to use a little extender to get that last screw in there. For the proximity sensor, we just kind of line this up. We're going to clip that down. It seems like it's good to me. And then we'll do one last test. Just make sure I didn't mess it up. Cool. And that's working. Guys, I hope this video helped you out. I hope if you've got a speaker arm issue, you're able to resolve it now. And if you've not yet had a chance to hit that like and subscribe button, it does help us out. It helps us build our community. We're trying to build a community where hopefully people can fix their devices and, you know, just enjoy VR for what it is, rather than worrying about the broken headset and the broken controllers that seem to inevitably come with almost all of them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we will see you on the next one.